Welcome, everybody, to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have David Farrell. David is the SVP of Sales at Venture, which is a $700 million organization. It's been a personal friend of mine for decades, which is weird to say, right? And today he is on. We're going to talk about really a couple of things like advancing your career, leveraging AI to advance your career, but also just overall advancement. And him and I were talking about this in a personal situation, and he was enthralled about it because of the lack of information kind of around it. And so wanted to bring David on today to talk through, because I thought it'd be very, very valuable for anybody looking to move up in a small, medium, or large organization. David, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate seeing you in such a formal setting. I'm used to having these conversations with you over a lunch.
I can't believe I called you David like 3 times instead of Dave. Like, it's just very weird. So
yeah, appreciate it.
I could go on for the whole episode about your intro and background, but I'm sure you're much more succinct than I am. So why don't you give us a real quick understanding about like your backstory, kind of how you got to be an SVP of sales at a $700 million organization. We'd just love to hear that, so that you, the listener, has some context in terms of where he's been and where he's going.
Yeah. I will say I think I might have got the S and the R wrong. I'm an RVP of sales.
Oh, I apologize.
Not the SVP. I don't want my SVP to find out and give me a phone call. That would actually go against probably what we're going to talk about today when it comes to promotability and how to move up with an organization. But yeah, I mean, look, I've been in sales as an individual contributor and as a sales leader, as high as the chief sales officer and third line leader, with a number of direct and indirect reports. And I think one of the things that you and I have talked about that I sort of identified was not a lot of people know how to navigate the waters of getting promoted within organizations. And I think it's hard to tell, but probably anywhere from 6 to 8 different promotions that I've earned in different areas of responsibility over the past years. But I've been in sales for 24 years at this point, and always in that sort of burgeoning SaaS environment into what we have today. So excited to talk about career paths with you.
Yeah, man. I mean, here's the thing. I think this is something that you've done a much better job than I have in the past. I tend to go brute force sometimes, and you look at it much more through a political lens. I mean, like, to give you some context too on Dave, like, he has folks that work for him and that talk about how much they love him. They try and follow him to his next organization and where he goes. And so, like, he's done an amazing job of creating not just, I should say, moving up the ranks himself, but also creating a team that really, really loves working for him. So just to kind of kick that off and give that, some context, I guess, Dave, where do you think, like, if we're to look at this from a foundational level, what do you think is the single biggest or handful of mistakes that people make when they're trying to move up through the organization, specifically in a role in revenue and sales?
Yeah, I think that so you're right. We do go about it a little differently. I think I try to just figure out how can I help the organization win by getting what I want out of it. And I'm a little bit more delicate, I think, in situations than you might be. You tend to be really, really straightforward. And, I think there's a few things that people do that sort of prevent them from moving up. And if you think about it, it's very hard to move past the perception of the person that they hired. Meaning that if you've been in an organization for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they still tend to think of you as the person they hired with the resume you came to them with. And as you're getting these, as you're landing accomplishments, as you're improving yourself, it's hard for people to see that if you're not advocating for yourself. And so I think what we should talk about today is really just how you advocate for yourself. How do you make sure that people recognize the accomplishments that you have, how your resume grows internally. And I think it starts with really just finding a mentor. And that's been something that served me really well, is finding either an internal or external mentor, someone that's career pathed ahead of you that maybe has the role or has been in the role that you want, and set aside some informal time with that person on as much as a biweekly basis. I'll tell you, I'm a mentor for, I think, about 3 people within my organization. And initially I sort of thought, hey, that's flattering to be asked. Really appreciate it. Do I have the time for this as a mentor? And I found that I've dedicated way more time than I thought to it, because I get just as much out of it as they do. And so I think one of the first things that people fail to do is just follow the path of someone that's already done it and take their advice. Instead, we're going down every path that we can imagine and just hoping it's the right one.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. I love that. So how do you go about step one, acquiring a mentor, right? And then we can get on the
Yeah.
mentee side too, because there's a lot of value in that. And in retrospect, that's probably something I should do more of, right? But like, what would you say is like foundational to acquiring a
Yeah.
mentor?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, look at the skills that you have and look at
Mhm.
the skills you don't have. So, you and I just talked about how you might have gone about things differently than I have in my career. They both served us very well. But maybe the fact that you were so straightforward in some circumstances and really cut to the chase, maybe that's a skill set that I feel like I could do better with. So,
Mhm.
if you can sort of identify maybe some of your skill gaps or personality traits or styles that might not be serving you that well, and figure out somebody within your organization or even externally that's done a really nice job in their career of progressing in that manner, I would just give them a call. I would shoot them a note and I would just say, "Hey, Ryan, I'm someone that really respects what you've done in your career. I've seen you accomplish these things, and I would just love if you might have some time to be a mentor for me and share some of the things that you've done and maybe how you've handled situations." And I don't think I've been told no to date when I've asked somebody to be a mentor. I don't think I've told anybody no either. And the framework that they've asked of me has been a half an hour every 2 weeks. So
Mhm.
I mean, if you really think about even personally, professionally, you've got a half an hour every 2 weeks for somebody. And I feel like that's our responsibility too, as leaders and as people that have been in the business world for 20 plus years, is to help people see around those corners and help them navigate the things that they might not have. So as an example, one of my folks that I mentor said, I see you in these really challenging conversations. I see you going through organizational change and leading us through change, and just the way you speak about it and how you handle maybe not necessarily conflict, but just change management is something that I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of people do, and I don't know how to do that. And I would love to get that from you. And so him and I just sit down. We have these sort of informal conversations where he will bring me challenges that he's had over the past 2 weeks. He'll bring me things that have come up that he's just curious about or something he's seen me do. And we just have a free sort of forum conversation about, how did I get to decide to do that? What were my other options? I'll give him, assignments. I see your bookshelf behind you, right? I'll give him books like Crucial Conversations that I've read that I felt have helped me grow my sort of skill sets. And then he'll read those. And our next topic is, hey, what did you get out of the book? How can you apply it? Are there situations that you have? So I think just finding that person with either skills or experience that you don't have that can plug gaps that you have will help you just round out that sort of career for yourself.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. So like, let's talk about you, for example. So you're a
Yeah.
leader now, right? You have a fairly large org that works underneath you in multiple different groups. Like, who do you look for as a potential mentor? Like, what kind of traits are you looking for?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking to scale myself, right? I'm leading about, 3 divisions, 25 different indirect reports that roll up to me, and I'm looking to level up to 50. So
Mhm.
I have somebody that I've worked with in the past that I call for advice, and I don't think we've had the official like, you're my mentor, I'm your mentee conversation, but he knows that I will text and call him with different situations or questions, because I think he's led organizations as high as 500 employees. So you're looking for someone that has been there, done that, right? Been there, done that. And I always tell people, I've done everything wrong and I've done everything right, and sometimes in the same decision. And so I'm looking for people that can tell me through their experience, hey, this is how I would do it, or what's your plan, David? And I can say, this is my plan. Okay, well, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? What if this happens? Really get me to think sort of creatively about the outcome of what I want to achieve.
Okay. Love that, man. So in terms of like, let's move this forward a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
all right, so you start to acquire skills, you get a
Yeah.
mentor, right? And you start to understand that. And let's talk about the end game, and then I want to get into some of the underpinning
Yeah.
details, right? So like when you effectively implement this, you get mentoring, you upskill through that, you
Yeah.
basically understand how to self-advocate, right? And
Yeah.
promote yourself and what you're doing and organizationally, like what are the results that you've seen as a byproduct of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're someone that is shoring up your deficiencies, right, or shoring up your gaps, then you become someone of value to other people, and other people will seek you out, whether it be colleagues or whether it be people that you report to, for everything from advice to problems to projects. And as you take on more projects and you're successful with those projects, that leads to more and bigger and better opportunities. And I interviewed somebody yesterday, and he had asked me, "Hey, how would I get promoted there within your organization?" And I said, "You've got to be successful in what you're doing, right? So first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost, we're in sales. You got to be hitting the number. When I talk to your colleagues, are your colleagues saying that person's running their business the right way? When I talk to your partners in operations, are they saying that's a person that gives us good clients? It sets the right expectation. And when I, as a leader, think about promoting somebody, I want a team of Ryans. If I'm like, Ryan's the guy, then I
Mm-hmm.
want 8 more Ryans. Then I'm promoting Ryan. So the end game should really be adding more responsibility into what you're doing, to progress your career. And then I think, depending on why you're leading, one of the reasons why I lead is I like to bring people with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives me great joy to hire somebody, watch them progress their career, and then promote them from within, and then just continue to sort of build a leadership following. I think that would be my end game. I think everybody's a little different. But if you're looking to get promoted, it's that added responsibility, getting new projects, and then basically moving up the ladder as you see fit.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. So what do you think the opportunity is, especially with everything that happened in 23? We're recording this early 24
Yeah.
with the wave and the innovation of AI.
Yeah, I think, and listen, I didn't invent this analogy, but, when the internet came out, okay, so I remember I was selling services that were phone in services. You would call in and report your payroll back in 2000, 2001, 2002. And the internet came out. And or the internet became a thing for my industry at the time. And a lot of people didn't know what to do with it. And I think there were some companies that very early on adopted the internet as a tool to scale and as a tool to create efficiencies. And I really see that with AI. There are people out there right now that are, I mean, you do a ton of studies on AI. You just put out some great stuff there, that are really using AI to solve problems. And I think that people within organizations that latch on to this new tool and use it to create efficiencies, they use it to level up their skill set. They use it to maybe run a better process, right? How can I go from a list of unknowns to a list of customers using AI? How can I expand my outreach? Those people are going to get attention within organizations, because you have others that are sometimes so busy doing what they're doing, they don't have time to kind of reach out and explore.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm somebody in an organization and I can find a way to leverage AI for myself to be a better whatever it is, right? Data processor, customer service person, salesperson, people are going to notice, because my results will naturally improve
Right.
and increase, and you're going to get questions about it. And I think becoming a thought leader and an expert in a topic, those are the people that get promoted. Your CEO, your CFO, your CSO, your C-suite got there by making decisions, by probably taking bold action, making decisions, and those decisions paid off for them. If you're not making decisions, if you're not investing in yourself, if you're letting new technologies sit on the sidelines, that's where you're going to be sitting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've made that mistake in the past where I get too much tunnel vision. When I was when I was a revenue leader, just on hitting the number and building the team, that I ignored everything else, which has its upsides to it, right? But at the same time, there's a lot going on that I could have taken advantage of or tapped into And I see a lot of revenue leaders doing the same exact thing. I had actually like a CRO of a company that had like 100 million in funding. They're smaller. He's like, hey man, I wish I was doing the AI thing like you, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I wish I knew more about that. I'm like, it's not that hard, man. Like, um, let me like it literally takes 2 hours of one day and you'll be a master at it or start
Yeah.
to go down that path. And like even, and I'm looking at this right because it's on my desk, but Amazon just did an AI skills report and they assessed basically almost like I think it was almost 1,400 companies and 3,400 people. And the big takeaway, there's two big takeaways I had from that. One is it was close to 84% of companies didn't know how to upskill and enable their team in terms of leveraging AI.
Yeah.
And it was like almost the same exact matching percentage on the employee side saying they didn't know where to find it, right?
Yeah.
They didn't know where to do that. So that's step one. The other thing that was really interesting is most people are just like, hey, this is just for coders or developers. And within that study, they identified like what are the top positions that if they had AI skills that they would pay more. And it was really interesting because marketing and sales was the second highest. And
Yeah.
they said if you had AI skills, they would pay you 43% more salary, right? So think of it, you're making 100K, that's 143K just because you took the time to integrate that into what you're doing versus someone else who hasn't, right? So
Well, and I think that's a great point because I think a lot of employees wait for their employer to give them the skills that they
yeah,
need to move up within their organization. But most employers aren't doing that. Most employers are making sure that they hired the skills that you bring to the table and they expect you to maybe perfect those skills or be better. But there's not a lot of like future forward thinking training that's happening. So if you're telling me that 84% of employers would pay more and they wish their employees had it, and employees are saying we wish we had it, well, they're obviously the employers are not giving it to the employees. And it goes back to that, go out and get the skill yourself, right?
yeah,
If you're waiting for your employer to give that to you, you're going to be glommed into everybody else in your category. But
yeah.
if you're standing out, if you're sticking out because you're someone that's gone out and acquired these skills and you found a way to do your job better and improve the organization through AI, I mean, just fast forward 15 years from now, I think we're going to be speaking about AI the same way we spoke about the internet. Like, could you imagine doing your job we're doing this on the internet, right? Could you imagine doing your job without the internet? In 15 years, it's going to be like, how the heck are we doing our jobs without AI? So the early adopters, they're going to go through some bumps and bruises. And I think it is a big concept that can be, kind of scary and daunting to people, but just boil it down to what you're trying to accomplish and find some people that have those skills, right? Who's the thought leader in AI and how's that person using that tool to go out? If you can get those and bring them within your organization, I think it's gonna be game changing for you and it could be for the firm.
Well, it's funny because there's someone I was working with and they're getting acquired from like a really, really big fund. And he's like, hey, I think he knows it's happening, right? Because it's in process. And he's like, I really want to understand this and be a thought leader in my organization. So when we get acquired, I could magnify the opportunities and bring value to the organization while also being looked at as a leader in this space.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for the guy because he kept getting shot down when he tried to pursue this. And he was very creative in how he handled it because security's like, oh, well, we can't do it because of security. Like it was just like that generic like security objection, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like I think they even show studies too where it's like 63% of people are using even their employees say they can't or employers say they can't, right? So people don't give a shit. Like it's like jumping on the internet. Obviously you got to have acceptable use, right? And not expose company information that's proprietary. But like the funny thing is the company that would not was like, hey, we can't, because of security. One of the guys that was saying this, I'm like, that the content you have on your website has been scraped and it was used to train the model. So like, he was like shocked, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of misconceptions like that because like literally now it's so easy to do. Like by nature, I am not a technical person. I'm savvy enough, but like I taught my daughter how to do it, who's 11 in 15 minutes, and she can create amazing graphic art now. You know what I mean? So that's what's wild about it, man. So let's get back on the career path because so what are other elements of your formula or framework that you would kind of identify. And then I'd like
Yeah.
you to summarize it too. Like if you have like a framework of like hit these 5 things or 4
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked. Number one, I think it's definitely the internal or external mentorship. I'd say number two is got to be that become an expert in your field or just invaluable. That sort of thought leader, that person that takes bold action. Grab different projects, involve yourself in as much as you can. Volunteer for things, right? That's not something I mentioned before, but we're rolling out a new technology, one that I'm familiar with within our organization from a past live, and it's new to my company. And
Mhm.
every time we talk about it, I raise my hand. I say I would love to be involved in that. I'm happy to help. How much time do you need? I'd say the other thing that people need to do is just get some constructive, brutal feedback in some instances. I think a lot of times managers are overburdened. Frontline managers are overburdened. They're overworked. I mean, at one point I had 16 direct reports as a leader. I was just drowning in
Oh
it.
yeah,
I don't think anybody got the
that's
best
insane.
version of me at that time for sure. I was just putting out fires. But sitting down with your direct report, your direct leader, and getting constructive, quality, even brutal feedback will absolutely make you better. And that's also another version of that sort of self promotion, because what does your leader see from that? They see somebody that's looking to improve, and they see somebody that's putting action to shore up any sort of gaps that they have. And I think, again, either managers don't know how to do it without hurting people's feelings, right? They're too busy or they're too scared to do it. So just sitting down and being sort of safe with them and saying, hey, help me out. I'm looking to get promoted. I'd love to take over when you get promoted someday. I'd love to take your spot. But I'm certain there's some stuff that could be holding me back. What's my professional reputation? What can I do to improve? And then actually do it. So way back in the day, you know this. I was a radio DJ in college, right? And one of the things that we would do was every time that I hit microphone on, it would record what I was saying on the air. And I would have to bring those, they were tapes back in the day, right? I would bring those tapes into my music director, Jeff, and Jeff would listen to those and he would just gut me. I mean, it was brutal. The things that you say that you are like, oh, that was really smart and funny. It sometimes was not very smart and funny. But he took me from an overnight radio guy that they only trusted to be on between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. to someone that they would put on during drive home and drive to work, the two busiest times
The
with the
money
heaviest
stuff.
listeners. And that was because he was just giving me absolutely brutal, candid feedback, and I took it and I improved. And I'd say get that constructive feedback, but do something about it. I've had a lot of people ask me for my feedback and then not put it into action. It's kind of worse than asking me than not asking at all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's hard, and that like here's the thing. Now, like as you were saying that, I'm like, like a good question. If I went back in time and I was looking at developing, I would ask like, hey, like, what are like have aspirations to do this. What are my blind spots in making that
Yeah,
happen? Like what do I need to work on? What do I need to lean into more? And what do I need to like do better at, right? To
yeah.
do that. So that's maybe a non-threatening way to kind of like ask that question to someone. Because it's funny, dude, there are some leaders that won't give direct feedback, right? Like,
That's
and
scary on both sides.
some people like it, and some people don't. But at least you know where you stand, right? If you get
Yeah,
it. So
yeah. I think you nailed it when you said blind spots. How do I know what to correct? How do I know what my reputation is if I don't ask? So I would implore people to ask. So I think probably number three is just getting that sort of constructive feedback. I think the other thing, and this is another area where conceivably AI could help you out, is I do think you've got to promote and advertise your accomplishments, within sort of the organization, or things that you've done. So if you landed a new client, if you increase the customer sat score by X amount, there are sort of cadences and sequences that you can build within, the right AI tool. to help you push content out there. And I think that's a big, what am I going to write about? What am I going to talk about? Who wants to hear from me kind of stuff? You got to really put that aside and think, what am I doing that other people could listen to or take value from? Are there trainings that I could write leveraging an AI tool? Is there a sequence that I could build? Can I turn what I do into a process or a formula and make sure that you're getting credit for that? I had somebody sit down with me and I had to remind them that our little division that we were running at the time increased results by 300% in the year and a half that I took it over. They were just looking at where it should be, and fair, right? We were on our way there. I'm like, hey, just remember where we started a year and a half ago and where we are now. If you're not having those conversations, you're effectively allowing them to sort of, again, think of you as what you should be or what you were when you were first hired. And I think it's really important for you to find a way to document, to track, to train people on what you've done and make sure that they recognize your progress.
I think that's so critical, man. Like I had to do that because like it's not natural, and it might sound weird of me saying this because I have a podcast and I put content out, but it's not natural for me to like self promote. Like it never has been, and it feels really awkward, even for me to put like testimonials or case studies up, right? Yeah. Like I've kind of gotten over that, but one of the things out of survival I did when I started an enterprise team is I'm like, hey, like the CEO was like getting on my case, and you know who this guy is, right?
Yeah.
Great things, some good things about him, some not so good things about him. But anyway, I digress. So the cool thing about it though is like, or not the cool thing, but what hit home what you just said. He's like, hey, we're not closing any deals yet. We're further behind, blah, 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 blah. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you realize we're having conversations with like $20 billion companies? I'm like, the largest company we talked to before was like 100 million. Like, do you realize how much progress that is? And then I had to keep pointing him to pipeline, versus revenue. Cause like enterprise sales take a long time to get those from a cold start. And so like, it was something that was like critical for my survival, because then he started to like the light bulb when I was like, oh, this is happening. This is moving in the right direction. Right. So I think it's a really strong point of what you said is like, they're measuring you versus where they want it to be versus like, hey, look at how much progress has actually happened. And so that's good for anybody listening. I think this is really
good. It's if you're not tracking your progress, if you don't know your data points, shame on you. You've got to know where they were, where you are, what you're working towards. Nobody's ever done, right? We're all still improving. And I had a similar story when I was an individual contributor. We used to get leads from a telemarketing team, and my AVP sat down with me at the time, and he said, and I think stack ranked number 10 out of like 200 in the company selling, and he said, we're taking these leads away from you. I felt like I was in the Glenn Ross leads, right? We're taking these leads away from you. And I'm like, why are you taking my leads? Well, because you're not closing them. And I said, okay, do you have a list of the leads that I haven't closed? And he, to his credit, pulls up this list of 30 leads. And I went through, and out of those 30 leads, I had only actually met with 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the other 28 had canceled, had never shown up to the appointment. Nothing ever happened. There was no sales motion, nothing for me to close or sell. And of the 2 that I had, I think 1 was in process and 1 something else, right? I said, okay, now I want you to pull up the stack rankings of closing percentage in our organization out of these 200 or so people. Where am I stack ranked closing wise? And I was in the top 5%, right? And so I'm like, okay, so what you're telling me is because 28 of these appointments were bupkis, nothing happened, were fake, you're going to pull the rest of my leads from one of your top closers? Does that make any sense to you? And he was like, you're right, you're keeping your leads. Right? So, and then I'm like, well, now we should talk about quality of leads because I'm getting crap leads.
Yeah.
So if you don't know your numbers and you're not able to sit down in front of somebody and sort of prove what you've done or advocate for yourself, then those decisions are going to get made without you. Like that CEO could have made a decision very detrimental to your career based off of incorrect data points or feelings. And I think we want to be in control of that.
That's such a good point, man. Such a good point. There is definitely truth in the data, and you have to own your own numbers. So Unfortunately, David, we are up on time.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about you? And then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, so look, I don't have a podcast. I do self promote, but look me up on LinkedIn, David L. Farrell. Again, I'm at Venture. It's VENSURE. I'm a sales leader by trade, but happy to give out advice and chat with folks as needed. And thanks for having me on, Ryan. This was always a great chat.
Oh yeah, man, it was a blast. We could talk for hours on whatever. Maybe we'll do. We gotta. I don't know. Maybe we'll do some different formats. I'm like going into the lab actually over the next few days and like looking at the formatting and the things that I'm doing with the show and really looking to take things to the next level. So, but it was awesome having you on, man. Appreciate it. This is a good topic that I don't think gets discussed enough. And there's a lot of value for those that listen and actually implement it like we talked about.
I like that. I see what you did there. Thanks for having me on.
So yeah, thanks for being on, and we will see you on the next episode.
All right, see you, bud.